So the New Orleans Saints have ended the last two seasons with heartbreaking defeats. The Saints have made it to the playoffs, they've played well, and they just haven't been able to succeed in the playoffs. I mean, last year, you all saw what happened. They got screwed by the referees. The season before that was the Minneapolis Miracle. I'm not exactly sure if that's what they're calling it, but that's what I'm calling it. And this year, they're determined to get back to the Super Bowl. So, can it happen? And another thing, if you ever go on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube and read comments that say Drew Brees is past his prime or some stupid stuff like that, call that person an idiot. Last season, Drew Brees excelled. He had 32 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. And of course, he had great players like Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas to play with. Kamara had 883 yards on the ground and also had 709 yards receiving, while scoring a combined 18 touchdowns. So the Saints have a lot of firepower, and the only big loss I see happening this year is they're going to miss Mark Ingram. That's going to be a tough guy to replace, and I think it's going to show in the standings, but it won't show that much. They did a lot right last year to get to 13-3. I don't think they'll repeat 13-3, but I do think they win the NFC South, so let me explain how they get there. They start the year at home against the Houston Texans, and while the Saints also tend to struggle early on in the season, I think they somehow pull off a victory here. It's going to be a defensive slugfest. It won't be offensive like it usually is. I think the Saints get their defense working here, and they win the game. Week 2, they go into LA and they get revenge for last year's NFC title game. The Saints go into LA and beat the Rams in Week 2, showing that they are the superior team. Well, in their minds, that's really to be determined. Week 3, they go into Seattle and the Seahawks hand them their first defeat. Russell Wilson runs wild on the Saints. Well, not really. He does just enough to win, and the Seahawks beat the Saints at home. So the Saints will be 2-1 by this point. Cowboys go into New Orleans, and the Saints win this one, taking themselves to 3-1. So the Saints are off to a good start. They're 3-1. They're riding high, and then they host the Bucks. And the Tampa Bay Bucks are a terrible team. They're a team the Saints should sweep. Yet every single year, the Saints somehow manage to split with the Bucks. Last year, the Bucks won in Week 1 in New Orleans. I see them doing it again this year, Week 5. Jameis Winston leads a victory over the Saints on the road. Week 6, the Saints go into Jacksonville, and I see the Jaguars shocking them and beating the Saints. The defense will find a way to get to Drew Brees and stop Alvin Kamara, and the Saints will be at 500. Then the biggest shock comes when the Bears beat the Saints in Chicago, which will put the Saints at 3-4. So you think I'm hating on the Saints? I'm just predicting what I think is going to happen. But this is where things start to turn their way. They blow out the Arizona Cardinals at home in Week 8. They have a bye week. The Falcons come into town and edge them out, shocking them as well. So they're 4-5 by this point. Things are a little bad, but things start to turn around. Week 11, they go into Tampa and they get their revenge, beating the Bucks. Alvin Kamara does his work. Michael Thomas torches that defense, and the Saints go to 5-5. Carolina goes into New Orleans and they fall to the Saints. The Saints are 6-5. The Saints get their revenge on the Falcons on Thursday Night Football. They find a way to win in Atlanta. Alvin Kamara does his job and beats the Falcons. And the 49ers come into New Orleans, and they don't have enough firepower to keep up with the Saints. So, as you see, that's 4 wins in a row, an 8-5 record. The division will not be as easy to win this year, but the Saints ultimately will prevail. They take down the Indianapolis Colts in Week 15 to go to 9-5. The Tennessee Titans pull off a victory in Week 16, but the Saints have won the division by this point, and they somehow still managed to beat the Carolina Panthers in Week 17 to finish 10-6 and go to the playoffs as a division champion once again. Do you agree with my predictions? Do you think the New Orleans Saints will win the division for the 3rd year in a row? Do you believe the New Orleans Saints possibly might miss the playoffs? Or do you think the Saints will have a better record than 10-6? Let me know in the comments, like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for watching this video.